In a small, bright town, the sun peeked through the clouds. This town was full of life, with people smiling and chatting. Trees lined the streets, and birds sang in the morning light. Every day felt the same as Margaret woke up in her cozy little room. She often opened her curtains to let the sun in. Margaret wanted to feel happy, but something inside her felt heavy. She looked outside and saw other people laughing. They seemed so free, but Margaret felt stuck. She lived in a beautiful world but struggled inside. Margaret was a talented artist. Her paintings filled the walls of her room and her friends loved them. They praised her work and told her she would go far. But deep down, Margaret felt anxious and had many worries. Each day, she painted with her hands, but her heart often felt numb. She wanted to share her art with everyone, yet she feared what they would think. Would they still like her art? Would they love her? These thoughts made her quiet and filled her with doubt. Her day started simply. She woke up, brushed her hair, and checked her phone. The bright screen showed her notifications. Friends tagged her in pictures and sent messages that said, "Wow, great job!" or "You are amazing!" Margaret felt a small spark of happiness bubble inside when she saw the likes and comments. This made her heart feel lighter for a moment, but it never lasted long. She needed more approval. She felt like she could not stop checking her phone. After breakfast, Margaret sat at her art desk and began to paint. Colors splashed on the canvas as she followed her dreams. It was a beautiful sight, but the joy faded when she thought about social media. She thought, what if no one sees my work? What if no one likes it? Each brush stroke became a fight between her heart and mind. The anxiety grew with every touch of the paint. At lunch, Margaret met her friends at a small cafe. They laughed and talked, but Margaret felt distant. She smiled and joined in on their stories, but her mind raced with thoughts. Does everyone feel this way? She wondered. The cafe was noisy but somehow felt quiet to her. While sipping her drink, she secretly glanced at her phone, waiting for messages and likes. She wanted the digital thanks more than anything. As the sun went down, Margaret returned home. The joy of the day faded slowly, and she felt more alone. Though her room was decorated with art, she felt empty. She scrolled through social media feeds, comparing herself to others. Perfect pictures appeared on her screen, showing lives filled with joy. Why can't my life be like that? She thought with disappointment. Margaret knew she had to break free from this cycle, but she didn't know how. Each day, she yearned for peace and happiness within herself. The pressure of looking perfect swirled in her mind. She thought she had to be strong and successful, but inside her spirit felt fragile. A deep desire grew in her heart, a wish to find a better path and break free from the chains of approval. Her journey was about to begin. As days went by, Margaret felt more pressure around her. The compliments from her friends turned into expectations. Everyone said she was a great artist, but she felt scared to fail. The fear grew stronger each day. One evening, Margaret submitted her work for a local art show. She wanted to believe in herself, but the worry curled around her heart. What if they do not like my art? She thought. Soon, her sleep became shallow, and anxious thoughts chased her dreams away. She painted late into the night, but all she felt was doubt. Then came the day of the art show. Margaret wore her favorite dress. She wanted to look nice but felt butterflies in her stomach. When she arrived, people looked at her work. They smiled and talked, yet all Margaret saw were flaws and mistakes. What if I am not good enough? She wondered. As she heard people comment on other art pieces, her heart sank deeper. She felt invisible and small. At that moment, an old friend approached her. Where have you been? I miss you, he said, sounding cheerful. But instead of feeling happy, Margaret felt tears burn behind her eyes. Her chest felt tight, and she could not speak. This was her turning point. In a sudden rush, the weight of fear, stress, and sadness became too much to bear. She stepped away and found a quiet corner. Margaret's breathing quickened. She closed her eyes, but it only made things worse. The colors around her blurred, and she felt the walls closing in. I can't do this anymore, she whispered with a shaking voice. The tears rolled down her cheeks. For the first time, she let herself feel the storm and sighed. She felt broken and scared. After several minutes, her friend found her. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Margaret, talk to me. Are you okay?" he asked softly. With her heart racing and fingers trembling, Margaret opened up for the first time. "I feel lost. I paint, but I am unhappy. I want people to like my art, but I am so afraid." Her voice broke as she shared everything. Her friend listened. He reminded her that art is about freedom and joy, not pressure. "You don't have to be perfect. You just need to be yourself," he said. His words sparked a light of hope in her heart. Slowly, she started to see that seeking help is a way to grow. This opinion felt powerful. Maybe, just maybe, she could find comfort and support. After that night, Margaret decided to begin a new journey. She would find ways to manage her anxiety and stress. She began to explore ideas of self-care. First, she started to write down her emotions in a small notebook. Each word helped lighten her load. Margaret also made a promise to spend less time on her phone. Instead, she would paint from her heart without fear of judgment. With each painting, Margaret felt a move toward healing. She learned that it was okay to seek help when feeling lost. The journey ahead still felt long. Still, she began to feel more control over her thoughts and emotions. It excited her to think of exploring new paths to peace and happiness. With every brush stroke, Margaret grew closer to discovering her true self. After that night at the art show, Margaret felt many emotions swirling inside her. She felt relieved but scared at the same time. The tears had washed away some pain, but they hadn't fixed everything. Every day brought confusion and a heaviness in her heart that she didn't fully understand. Margaret wanted to feel okay, but the fear always crept back in. She sat alone in her room and thought about what her friend had said. She knew that getting help could change her life, but taking that step felt enormous. One afternoon, with trembling hands, Margaret searched online. She wanted to learn about therapy and how it could help. She found some websites about mental health. The words comforted her. "You do not have to suffer alone," one site said. "Talk to someone who can help." These words gave her courage. Margaret decided to find a therapist. The call was nerve-wracking, but she did it. She scheduled her first session, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a tiny spark of hope. When the day of her session arrived, Margaret stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair. She felt nervous energy in her body. "What will I say?" she thought. The therapist's office looked warm and relaxing. Comfortable chairs were placed around a small table. As she sat, Margaret took deep breaths and closed her eyes for a moment. The therapist greeted her with a soft smile. "Welcome, Margaret. What brings you here today?" The question felt heavy but inviting. Margaret found herself speaking, sharing her feelings of fear and confusion. "I want to feel happy, but I don't know how," she admitted. With each word, Margaret felt a burden lift. The more she shared, the more she felt understood. During their sessions, they talked about her feelings and worries. Margaret learned that it was okay to ask for help. She faced some uncomfortable truths about herself. She learned that her fear of not being good enough held her back. By facing these feelings, Margaret began to feel stronger. The therapist also introduced her to tools like meditation and mindfulness. Margaret felt curious and excited to try these practices. Every morning, she set aside time to breathe deeply and focus on the present moment. These small exercises helped calm her racing thoughts. Soon, they became part of her daily routine. Margaret also began to spend more time outdoors, feeling the sun on her face and appreciating nature. At home, she created a simple self-care list. It included activities that made her feel good, like painting or listening to music. Slowly, she discovered that these little things were important. Each time she followed her self-care list, it brought her a step closer to healing. Painting became a source of joy rather than anxiety. She painted for herself, free of fear of judgment. With support from her therapist, she began to explore her feelings more deeply. She started to understand her actions and thoughts. "Why do I seek so much validation from others?" Margaret wondered while sketching in her notebook. It was hard to face these questions, yet they taught her valuable lessons about self-worth. The journey was not easy, but it felt right. Each step she took was a step toward a healthier mind. As the weeks went by, Margaret noticed small changes in her life. She felt a growing sense of clarity and connection with herself. There was still work to be done, but she felt more hopeful. Each day brought new opportunities for growth. Margaret began to believe that she could create a life filled with happiness and joy. Healing was possible, and she was ready to embrace it. Margaret felt a mix of excitement and fear as she began her new journey into emotional healing. She quickly realized that it wasn't easy. One morning, she took out her shiny new journal. The blank pages looked so inviting, but Margaret hesitated. She wanted to write her feelings, but what if the words didn't come? She opened the journal with shaking hands and stared at the empty lines. After a few moments, she began to write furiously. "I feel lost," she wrote at first. The pen moved quickly as she let her emotions flow onto the pages. Some days she wrote about happy moments. Other days she wrote about her sadness and fears. Words and emotions came pouring out. But sometimes, when she reread her thoughts, self-doubt crept back in. "What if this doesn't help me?" she questioned. It was hard to stay positive. Each journaling session left her feeling a bit better, yet also overwhelmed. Margaret wished the process could be quick. She wanted change to happen overnight. Still, she learned it was okay to feel confused. The journey was not a straight path. There were twists and turns. Mindfulness was another thing Margaret tried. She watched videos that told her to focus on her breath. One day, she sat outside in her backyard. Margaret closed her eyes and tried to breathe deeply. Nature surrounded her. Birds chirped, and the wind played gently with her hair. However, her mind wandered quickly. "Did I forget to reply to a message?" she thought. "What is happening on my social media?" Sitting still felt harder than she expected. The thoughts bounced around like a pinball machine in her mind. Margaret opened her eyes with frustration. "How can I clear my mind when there is so much noise in it?" she asked herself. Sometimes it felt like her world pushed her to find constant excitement and approval. Margaret stayed committed to practicing mindfulness, even when it felt difficult. She slowly learned that these techniques were not a quick fix. They needed practice, just like painting. Each day, she wrote in her journal and practiced mindfulness, but progress felt slow. On her bad days, she only wrote one sentence. "Today was hard. I felt sad." Other days, she filled 5 pages with thoughts. Doubts still crept in often. "Will I ever feel better?" Margaret would wonder. It felt like her emotions were a storm, and she was trying to sail on a tiny boat. Despite the struggles, Margaret continued looking for more tools to help her. She stumbled upon some guides about emotional management techniques. She learned small steps like taking short walks or drawing. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, moving her body helped calm her thoughts. Drawing little things inspired her spirit, and it allowed for creative expression. As she started to build new routines, one thing remained certain: the journey was challenging. Some days felt bright, while other days were filled with gloom. Margaret began to understand that true emotional intelligence takes time and effort. It was a mixture of ups and downs, and each word written in her journal felt like a small victory. Margaret now embraced the idea that it was okay to stumble. She remembered the first time she picked up her paintbrush, how it took many tries to create something beautiful. Emotional healing was no different. It was all part of her story, one that she would write with bold strokes and soft whispers. Step by step, she was on the right path, learning to break free from her old patterns. It was a winding road, but each direction she took was a chance for growth and hope. Margaret stood in front of her easel one rainy evening, feeling the familiar weight of fear pressing on her chest. The rain tapped against her window, but inside her heart a storm raged. After months of working on herself, she had made progress in healing. Still, the old wounds felt raw and painful. She was due at an art exhibit soon. The thought made her stomach turn. What if people did not like her work? What if they compared her to others and found her wanting? With a trembling hand, she squeezed her paintbrush as doubt flooded her mind. memories from the past returned to her. In high school, a teacher had told her that her art was not good enough. Those words echoed in her head. Each time she picked up a brush, she fought to silence that voice, saying, "You are not an artist." The fear of failure came back like a stubborn ghost, whispering in her ear and gripping her heart tightly. "Why can't I shake this feeling?" she thought as tears filled her eyes. The pressure to succeed, to be validated by others, began to overwhelm her. It pushed her back toward her old habits and negative thoughts. "Maybe I should not go to the exhibit at all," she whispered to herself. The thought made her heart ache. She had worked very hard to feel good about herself and her art. Margaret took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She remembered what her therapist had taught her about facing fears and emotions. "You must confront your past to move forward," her therapist had said. But at that moment, the idea felt scaring. How could she face the feelings hidden deep inside her? The thought of going back to a place where she felt unworthy filled her with panic. With shaking hands, Margaret opened her journal and began to write. "I feel trapped," she wrote. "The past hurts me, and I want to escape." As the words poured out, she felt a mixture of sadness and strength. It was hard to face her feelings. She needed to see them clearly to better understand herself. Margaret thought of the choice ahead. She could either cancel her artwork display or face her fears and be brave. Her heart raced as she stared at her easel. What would it take to break free from this bondage of past pain? She began to realize that healing required being vulnerable and honest with herself. "Maybe I can show my art no matter what," she said with determination. It was more than just an exhibit for Margaret. It was a test of her growth. Standing in front of her paintings became a way to battle her doubts. It was a challenge she could not ignore. She deserved to share her story, even with her fears. Reflection after reflection, each painting told a part of her journey, and this was her moment to shine. Clenching her fists, Margaret made a decision. She would display her artwork at the exhibit. It was time to step out of the shadows of her past and embrace the light of her newfound self. "I will be proud of my artwork," she declared to herself. "No one can take that away." This moment felt monumental, and with each breath, her emotions shifted. As the night approached, Margaret felt a change deep inside. She understood that the conflict between her past and her present was not just an end, it was a beginning. In choosing to show up as her true self, she took a critical step toward her own healing. Margaret could not erase her history, but she could change how it shaped her future. With her heart racing and hope glowing, she prepared to show her art to the world. The night of the art exhibit arrived, and Margaret stood in front of the venue, feeling a swirl of nerves in her stomach. The lights shone bright, and laughter filled the air. People milled about, admiring the artwork displayed on the walls. For a moment, Margaret felt proud of her work. But as she entered the room, old insecurities came rushing back. What if no one liked her paintings? Would they judge her? The storm inside her grew stronger, threatening to drown her confidence. As she wandered through the exhibit, an awkward moment happened. She noticed a colleague, Maya, speaking to a group about their art. Maya had always been confident and very talented, and the more Margaret listened, the more her feelings of self-doubt grew. "I am not like them," she thought as she felt small and unworthy. Her heart raced. She wanted to hide away instead of sharing her own work. In that moment, Margaret caught herself spiraling into panic. She remembered her therapist's words about emotional regulation. "Take a moment to breathe and feel," they said. Margaret took a step back, focusing on her breathing. She took a deep breath in, held it for a second, and slowly let it out. With each breath, her mind turned clearer. She reminded herself that her feelings were valid, but she needed to manage her reactions. Feeling steadier, Margaret recalled the importance of empathy. She thought about Maya, realizing that everyone faces their challenges. "Maya looks confident," Margaret sighed. "But we all have doubts inside us." By thinking about Maya's struggles, Margaret found a sense of connection, and her heart felt less heavy. They were all on their journeys in art, each battling their own doubts. Determined, Margaret decided to speak with Maya. She approached her and introduced herself nervously. Hi, I'm Margaret. I love your work, she said, managing a small smile. Maya turned her attention and smiled back warmly. Thanks, Margaret. I'm glad you're here. The art community is wonderful. Margaret took a deep breath. I feel shy about sharing my art tonight. I always worry that I am not good enough, she confessed, her voice steady. Sharing her feelings felt vulnerable, but it was also freeing. Maya looked at her with kindness. You shouldn't worry. Art comes in many forms. Just show them what you love, Maya encouraged. This simple encouragement lit a spark inside Margaret. After their talk, Margaret took another moment for herself. She reflected on her inner growth. It was okay to feel nervous, but she chose to share her story. She prepared herself to present her paintings, aware of her emotions but also ready to express her needs calmly. At that moment, something shifted in her heart. She felt a sense of confidence rising from deep within. As she stood before her framed artworks, ready to speak, Margaret thought back on all her struggles. She remembered the journey she had taken. It was filled with challenges and emotional storms, and now she found strength in sharing her truth. As she held the microphone, she felt the courage she had been building inside her. Despite the nerves twisting in her stomach, she spoke assertively, saying, "Thank you all for being here. I am honored to share my art tonight. Each piece holds a part of my journey and my heart." In that moment, Margaret chose to trust in herself and what her art represented. She took a breath, focused on her passion, and let the love for her work shine through. The past attempts to push her down transformed into a source of strength. Tonight she would break free from doubt and let her courage guide her. As Margaret spoke about her artwork, a warm feeling spread throughout her body. The moment she began sharing her passion, something inside her shifted. Instead of focusing on her fears, she felt proud and excited. She looked all around the audience, seeing their smiling faces as they connected with her art. It was like a bridge forming between them. That reminder of shared experience filled Margaret with excitement. The moments she once feared transformed into inspiration. As she talked about each painting, telling stories about her emotions and experiences, she saw how her words reached people. The audience listened carefully, showing their support. It touched her heart in a way she had never felt before. When Margaret finished her presentation, the applause from the audience filled the room. Their cheers lifted her spirit. It was then she realized how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she felt crippled by anxiety, afraid of being judged. Now, she stood confidently in front of a crowd, showing her work with pride. This kind of personal growth amazed her. A stranger approached her with tears in their eyes and said, "Your art spoke to me. It made me feel understood." With a smile and gratitude in her heart, Margaret felt the power of connection. She could see that her journey through emotional intelligence was not just about her, it was about reaching others. In that moment, she knew what she was doing really mattered. As the night continued, Margaret felt a change within her. She was no longer in a battle with her emotions, she was learning to embrace them. The work, journaling, mindfulness, and therapy, was paying off. When doubts would bubble up again, she could now identify them. She could ask herself questions like, "Why am I feeling this way?" This self-awareness was part of her achievement. Later, while mingling with other guests, Elsie bumped into Maya again. This time, it felt different. Margaret greeted her with a genuine smile and said, "Thanks again for believing in me." Looking Maya in the eyes, Margaret shared about her journey over the past few months, telling her about the ups and downs she had faced. It felt good to open up and show others the real Margaret. Maya nodded. "It's clear you've grown so much. You really showed your heart tonight," she said with kindness. Margaret felt the warmth of her words wrap around her. Instead of seeing her as just a fellow artist, Maya recognized Margaret for the person she was becoming. This was an important moment. It made Margaret realize that emotional intelligence allowed her to connect with others deeply and honestly. As the night came to a close, Margaret made a promise to herself. She would continue this path of learning and growing. There would still be challenges ahead, and she knew that treating herself with kindness was essential. Each experience, whether good or bad, would teach her more about herself. Walking out of the venue, the warm breeze whispered familiar words of encouragement. Margaret had embraced not only her art but also her ability to face her emotions. She understood that true growth comes from within, and emotional intelligence was now a vital part of her life. Filled with hope and new possibilities, she knew this was just the beginning of an exciting journey ahead. Falling action. After the art exhibit, Margaret felt light and hopeful. The joy of sharing her work lingered in her heart. It was clear to her now that healing was a choice. Following her emotional breakthrough, routine became her ally. Margaret started to apply the lessons she learned, and each small step brought her closer to emotional health. With a clear mind, she decided to make positive changes in her life. Each morning, she woke up a little earlier to dedicate time for herself. She began with meditation, focusing on her breathing for just a few minutes. The calming moments allowed her to feel present. She painted her thoughts, not just on canvas but on paper too. Writing became a source of freedom for her. Margaret filled pages with her feelings, fears, hopes, and dreams. It felt like letting go of heavy weights she had carried for too long. Along with journaling, she found mindfulness practices very helpful. She took walks in nature, noticing every little detail around her. The colors of the flowers, the sounds of the birds, and the warmth of the sun on her skin all reminded her of beauty in the world. This practice helped center her thoughts and cleared her mind from negativity. Another significant step was slowly detoxing from social media. Margaret realized how much time she spent scrolling through her feed, seeking validation from likes and comments that only made her feel anxious. Instead of checking her phone habitually, she decided to set boundaries. She limited her screen time, which allowed her more moments to connect with herself. Instead of focusing on others, she turned her attention back to her art and her own journey. This change brought relief and freedom. As weeks passed, the small successes filled her with joy. A day came when she completed a painting that made her heart sing. It captured her vulnerabilities and her strength. Showing it to her friends felt natural and rewarding. Each compliment felt genuine, and Margaret allowed herself to accept it without fear. "I worked hard for this," she reminded herself proudly. The old self-doubt began to fade. On days when her emotions felt strong, Margaret did not shy away from speaking to her therapist. They recognized that feeling sad was part of the healing process. "It's okay to feel this way sometimes," her therapist often said. But instead of drowning in sadness, Margaret learned to use her practices to navigate the feelings. Writing in her journal after difficult moments reminded her of growth. "I am still growing," she would write. "Every emotion is part of my journey." Setting healthier emotional boundaries was another important lesson. Margaret learned to express her thoughts that were often bottled up inside. She told her friends how she felt, and they listened. The conversations created deeper connections with those around her. It also allowed friendship to blossom without the weight of expectation. The journey of emotional wellness showed Margaret that change was indeed possible. Each day was a step forward, a chance to learn and grow. She embraced the challenges and faced them head-on with courage. With every breath, Margaret felt more in control of her life. The path ahead, while still evolving, glowed with endless possibilities. The hope for a brighter future filled her heart as she continued moving forward. She now knew that she had the power to shape her emotions and transform her mindset. Margaret was on her way to becoming the best version of herself, and she relished every moment of the journey. As the days turned into weeks, Margaret's transformation began to take shape. She attended therapy regularly, and each session brought new insights. With every visit, she felt lighter. These meetings were crucial for helping her understand herself better. Her therapist guided her gently, encouraging her to explore feelings she had kept hidden for too long. This support allowed her to build a stable foundation for her emotional health. Establishing emotional boundaries became a significant milestone for Margaret. In the past, she had often feared disappointing others. This fear led her to say yes to everything, even when it felt heavy on her heart. Now, she spoke honestly about her needs. When a friend asked her to join an event that made her anxious, she knew how to respond calmly. "I appreciate the invitation, but I need some time for myself." Each time she set a boundary, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. This simple act empowered her and taught her respect for her own feelings. Journaling also became an essential part of Margaret's routine. At the end of each day, she would reflect on what she had experienced. She poured her heart onto the pages, writing about her victories and struggles. "Today, I felt anxious at first, but I embraced those feelings," she noted one day. She learned that writing was a way to confront her thoughts. It helped her process emotions and discover patterns she didn't see before. With every entry, she felt her self-esteem slowly improve. Margaret began to believe she had a voice. The mindfulness practices she adopted further enhanced her emotional stability. Each morning, she practiced meditating. Sitting outside while the sun rose became her special time. She honored each breath, feeling at peace. Margaret discovered that when panic tried to grip her, she could turn to mindfulness. Reminding herself to breathe deeply helped calm her racing heart. In those moments, she learned the power of stillness. The world around her could be chaotic, but her mind could find peace. Detoxing from social media was another important step in her journey. At first, it felt challenging. She worried about missing out on updates or connections. But as she gradually reduced her screen time, Margaret found freedom. Instead of scrolling endlessly, she invested that time into painting, writing, and being with her loved ones. With each passing day away from the digital world, she felt healthier. Her anxiety lessened. She no longer sought constant validation from online likes or comments. It was a turning point that helped her realize her worth was not defined by others. As these pieces fell into place, Margaret's emotional landscape transformed. She handled challenges more calmly, and her confidence grew. There were still tough moments, but they felt different now. Instead of sinking into despair, she faced obstacles with a sense of hope. For example, when an unexpected disappointment came her way, instead of hiding away, she reached for her journal and wrote. Each small success counted, creating a ripple effect in her life. Friends noticed her change and commented on how she seemed more radiant. "You shine more brightly than before," one said, and the compliment lit up her spirit. Margaret's heart swelled with pride. Every action she had taken led her closer to the version of herself she wanted to be. She was slowly crafting a brighter future. With the tools she had gained through hard work, Margaret stepped through each day with strength and purpose, eager to embrace whatever life had in store for her next. As the seasons changed, so did Margaret. After months of hard work, she finally felt a sense of balance and peace within herself. The anxious thoughts that once wanted to control her faded slowly into the background. Margaret began each day with gratitude, honoring her journey and small victories. Now, she woke up excited to embrace life's challenges with purpose and clarity. The skills she had developed, mindfulness, journaling, and setting boundaries, became natural tools for her. When faced with daily stress, she could pause and breathe, remembering how to center herself. Each deep breath reminded her how far she had come. If worries arose, she wrote them down, filling her journal with thoughts that no longer held power over her. This act made her feel empowered. She recognized that acknowledging her feelings was essential to her growth. Conversations with friends were richer and more meaningful. Margaret found joy in sharing her experiences and connecting with others. She listened more deeply, offering them understanding that came from her own journey. Her relationships became stronger because she could express her needs and support them in return. The boundaries she set added space for healthy communication, creating trust and compassion among her friends. Margaret no longer felt alone in her struggles. She created a community of support. In her art, Margaret discovered renewed passion. Instead of painting for approval, she expressed her true self on canvas. Each color reflected her understanding of emotional wellness, showing strength and vulnerability. She shared her art at a community showcase, and the response was remarkable. Instead of fearing judgment, Margaret felt pride. People were drawn to her creations and resonated with the stories behind them. Standing proud while sharing her heart felt freeing, and she knew this was her path. Margaret understood now that caring for her mental health was an ongoing journey. While she hoped for clear skies, she also accepted that some days might be cloudy. Whenever difficulties appeared, she encouraged herself to stay strong. She continued her therapy sessions, comforting herself with the knowledge that growth requires patience. Mental health was not a destination but an evolving journey shaped by daily choices. With each challenge, Margaret learned to practice compassion toward herself. No longer did she seek validation from outside her heart. Instead, she found it within herself. Each positive affirmation and kind word she spoke to herself grew more meaningful. Standing before the mirror, she said, "I am enough." Embracing self-love opened doors to a healthier life, filled with hope. As Margaret moved forward, she felt equipped to handle life's ups and downs. The tools of emotional intelligence had transformed her, showing her resilience and compassion. When faced with tough decisions, she trusted her instincts and knew she had the strength to make choices aligned with her values. The fear of falling into old patterns faded away. Now, she walked with confidence and grace, embracing who she had become. Margaret had reached a new equilibrium, fully understanding the importance of self-care and internal validation. Every day held promise, and she was ready to accept it. With her heart open and her journey ahead, Margaret stepped into the world with a renewed sense of peace. She knew that she could navigate whatever came her way. This was her life, and she was excited to embrace it. Margaret stood at the edge of her favorite park, watching the sun set behind the trees. The warm colors filled the sky, and she felt peace in her heart. Each sunset reminded her of how far she had come. She was no longer the person weighed down by fears and insecurities. Instead, she grew into someone confident and determined. Margaret realized that her journey was not just about healing, it was about living fully. Making decisions felt different now. Whether it was choosing what to paint or how to spend her time, Margaret embraced her choices. She learned to trust her instincts, knowing that her feelings were valid. In the past, she might have hesitated, seeking approval from others. Now, she knew that her opinion mattered most. Margaret decided to pursue her passion for art more seriously, enrolling in art classes that inspired her creativity. This small step was one way she claimed her life. Her relationships also transformed. With friends, she actively practiced open communication. They talked about everything, their dreams, fears, and emotions. By sharing, they created bonds that felt deep and genuine. Margaret's friendships were no longer built on superficial connections. They were built on trust, understanding, and a willingness to support one another. Whenever a friend asked for help, she felt joy in giving it, knowing they would do the same for her. Margaret developed a balanced lifestyle, making self-care a priority. She combined her mindfulness practices with daily routines. Mornings started with a few quiet minutes of meditation. She drank a warm cup of tea, reflecting on what she was grateful for that day. This practice helped her focus on the positive aspects of her life. She felt great about the way she started her days, understanding that little changes lead to big results. Evenings drew her back into her art studio, where she explored colors without fear. Whether painting alone or with friends, she lost herself in creativity. Each finish felt like a celebration, a reminder that she did this for herself. Margaret learned that fulfillment comes not just from the end result but from the joy in the process. This shift in perspective brought her many satisfactions. Margaret recognized that mental wellness requires constant effort. She understood that it wasn't something that magically stays fixed. Challenges still arose, and she knew how to respond. Whenever thoughts of self-doubt crept back, she used her tools. She would pause, take a deep breath, and reach for her journal. "What do I need to address today?" she would ask herself. Writing became an anchor in times of uncertainty. As she continued to grow, Margaret felt prepared to face anything life threw her way. Resilience became her companion. Friends saw her strength and admired the way she handled challenges with kindness toward herself and others. They knew that she understood the importance of self-love. Hearing these affirmations filled her with warmth. It was a reminder that her journey was inspiring to others. Margaret had transformed, connecting with her authentic self. This newfound confidence rippled through her life, touch-tinging every aspect. She arrived at a place where inner peace mattered more than seeking outside approval. Embracing herself completely was her greatest achievement. Standing at the park, watching the colors of the setting sun blend into twilight, she felt ready for the adventures ahead. Each sunrise promised a new day filled with possibilities. Life carried both ups and downs, which made her who she was: strong, compassionate, and determined. Margaret smiled at the future, fully aware that she held the power to shape it. She had stepped confidently into her life, equipped with valuable tools for any challenge that came her way. Every day felt like a new beginning, and Margaret was grateful for the journey ahead.